welcome to our second episode of Issues, where we look at some of the ways in which service and volunteerism can help to tackle some of Maine's largest challenges. My name is Brian Roach, Communications Officer for Volunteer Maine, and we thank you so much for joining us again here on our second episode. We'll introduce our guests in just a moment, but first, a little bit about today's conversation, which will center around an issue that is frequently discussed in the Volunteer Maine office: a dwindling number of youth service opportunities, and at a larger level, a dwindling number of resources to provide Maine's youth with opportunities to become civically engaged. One solution to this issue that we're pursuing at Volunteer Maine, as well as some of our other partners in state commissions across the country, is the avenue of service learning, which is making a little bit of a comeback. So here to help us talk through all of this are today's guests. First, we have Kelsey Preecs, Program Officer for Volunteer Sector Initiatives and our in-house service learning guru. And we have Tracy Harkins, the founder of Harkins Consulting, LLC, which provides professional development and resources to engage and motivate student learners in both formal and informal settings. Thank you both so much for joining us here. I know, Kelsey, it was probably hard to pull you out of the office today for a little side project. In all seriousness, we are extremely busy. A lot of exciting initiatives and issues that we're going to be tackling that we'll actually be talking about in a few of our upcoming episodes. But let's stay focused. Let's get right on to today's conversation. And Tracy, I will start with you as our outside expert here. Can you take us through, as I put it, the evolution of service learning?
Service learning has been around for a very long time, but there was a huge boost in service learning between 1992 and 2011. There was federal legislation that came in and money was given to the Corporation for National Community Service. Isn't that who funds the commission?
Yes.
Yeah. And is it now called AmeriCorps?
Yes.
Yeah, doing business as AmeriCorps.
It all.
Yeah, so federal money came in to support the development of Learn and Serve. And Learn and Serve was to promote pre-K through college students engaging in service learning in their communities. And so during the prime of Learn and Serve, and that went, as I said, from 1992 to about 2011, there were like almost 1.5 million students were engaged in service learning each year. But then in 2011, and also a cool thing about service learning is it's bipartisan. It's supported on both sides of the aisle, but in 2011, the corporation's budget was cut, huge cut, I think like $70 million. And in that cut, Learn and Serve disappeared. Their budget was around $50 million. And with that cut, the federal money wasn't there. And federal money through Learn and Serve supported service learning in every state. Every state got formula money. And as I said, it supported a lot of students. So service learning is still happening. There's organizations like mine, lots of organizations around the country that have still been working and helping to promote service learning, but with that huge amount of money cut, service learning, definitely the capacity to build has gone down. But the good news is that there is a movement to refund Learn and Serve. In March of 2020, the Commission on Military and Community Service made a recommendation to put $200 million back into the corporation, AmeriCorps, budget. And in it, they want that $200 million to be used to build Learn and Serve back up again and get money out to K through 12 and colleges, both in formal and informal settings, to support Learn and Serve. Right now, it didn't get put into appropriations at this point, but there is a recommendation from appropriations to start figuring out how they're going to do it for the next fiscal budget. So that's the good news, and there's a coalition to support service learning. So people, if they want to learn more about it, you should check them out. They have a website.
And we'll put the link in the description of the episode. But just a quick aside before going on to that question, that Inspire to Serve report that you mentioned, already lots of good coming out of that. And I will mention to folks, just a little bit of a plug, that we do have available also on our YouTube channel a conversation last year with Steve Barney, who sat on that commission, During the 2020 Maine Volunteer Leadership Conference, we had a roundtable about that. Definitely check out that video if you want to learn a little more about this report that is going to be a game changer for service across the board. You can already tell with some of the movements going on. So now I'm glad you mentioned that. But before we get back to the larger issue, Tracy, could you let us know how you got involved in service learning? Let us know a little bit about your background and what led up to the creation of Harkins Consulting.
Yeah, so I was a classroom teacher. I went to college to be a teacher, and right out of college, I jumped into teaching. I was a multi-age 3-4 teacher. I was also a 7th grade history and language arts teacher. I taught in Greater Gloucester, Maine. And I did service learning as a teacher. I didn't know it was called that back then. But I really believed that when students were learning about things, that they should see how it connects to the community in real life. So we used it as a strategy, my teaching partner and I. And back then, my kids, we were learning about waste issues and how we generate too much trash. And my kids came up with wanting to learn about composting and setting up a composting system. I knew nothing about composting back then. Now I'm a big composter. But back then, and we learned with our community partners, the transfer station, and all the wonderful community groups that helped us learn about it, and as students were trying to solve this issue. Later, my kids, we were learning about the town. The 4th graders were learning about the town, and they partnered up with the local business association, and they created a business guide to teach people coming into the community about the local businesses. So as I said, I didn't know it was called service learning back then. It just felt like good teaching and learning. And so in 2000, I left teaching in the classroom, and I moved to an organization, a nonprofit called Kids Consortium. And from 2000 to 2014, I worked for this nonprofit, and we worked around the country helping teachers and schools and school districts and even state departments implement service learning. But in 2014, which was kind of a result of the downfall of Learn and Serve, when Kids Consortium was a grant-funded organization, and so we made the decision, at that point I was the executive director, we made the decision to change it from a for-profit to a nonprofit. And so I'm still doing the same work as Kids Consortium, and my wonderful team of colleagues that we developed curriculum, I'm still using the books we wrote and the things, but now in a different business model as a for-profit called Harkins Consulting.
Now, Tracy, if you wouldn't mind, can I ask you, just for the folks at home who may not understand immediately, could you enlighten us on the difference between what we call or what we view as community service and service learning?
Sure. It's a common question. It's probably one of the first things I talk about in most of the trainings that I do with folks, is to make sure that we're all talking the same language, because many people do have a misconception of what service learning is. So community service is an activity. There's a problem or a need out in the community, and adults or students try to make an impact on it. It could be that the local food pantry needs food. It could be that there's a park that needs to be cleaned up of garbage, and so students go and pick up garbage or whatever. Those are all community service activities. Where service learning is a teaching methodology, it's a process in which we have students identify problems and needs in their communities with the help of adults. And then we also teach them the skills and give them lots of knowledge so they become confident around this topic, so that they can come up with solutions on how to make an impact on it. And service learning is very student-driven. At the beginning, there's a lot of adults helping students to understand the problems and needs, the cause, the effect, the history of the problems, what's been done in the past, who's been working on this. But then we slowly give over the project to the students, in which they then decide, what can we do about this? What are our knowledge and skills so that we can make an impact on this problem? As opposed to community service, which it tends to be more adult-driven, service learning is much more student-driven, and it's important to build the skills so the students become the problem solvers, not just the worker bees of doing a service.
Now, that really helps to drive home the learning aspect of service learning and the difference. So, Kelsey.
Yes.
Service learning is going to be a huge part of your world for the foreseeable future, and you'll be collaborating with Tracy, which is very exciting. So we'll get into the details about that just a little later. But could you first talk about how you two connected and a little bit about the grant that's making this focus on service learning all possible?
Sure. So Tracy has worked with our group before, and so I was actually connected to her through a different question that we had, and it was kind of like a light bulb went off because I was applying for this grant, and the grant was funded by the Mott Foundation, and they are really interested in youth service and how to get youth more involved in service. And so the grant that they put out was basically, find ways to create more youth service for those who might not usually get it, and that can mean whatever it means for your community, basically. And so realizing, we've had this great relationship with Tracy in the past and doing service learning and it's effective, that's how we decided to apply for that and just move forward with service learning because we know that it's effective. We know Tracy's good at it. And we wanted to be able to reach out to those community organizations and less pressure on the schools just because of what happened in 2020 and they're already sort of dealing with remote and not remote. Giving more power to the community organizations to lead that charge on service learning for youth and youth engagement and youth service.
Well, it all sounds extremely exciting for the prospect of service learning. Tracy, I do want to ask you this. Now, it can be argued that Maine is rooted in a culture of service and community support. Actually, our August episode is going to dive into some of the data behind that. Kelsey's also involved with that initiative as well.
See you
A
soon.
lot of Kelsey on the upcoming episodes of Issues. But back to the question though, when you look at some of the issues around Maine's aging population, it will be up to a new generation to kind of keep this legacy of service alive. Can service learning be the catalyst to increase youth service and civic engagement in the state of Maine?
Yeah, I think I have to be careful because I really believe that service learning is the silver bullet to everything in life. So if we focus in on research really supports, one, right away, service learning increases students' attendance in school. So that's a beautiful thing for schools. But another big piece of research talks about students' involvement in their community after school. And some of the research out there talks about students being more involved in community organizations. 15 years after they participate in service learning, more likely to vote. But more importantly for me, service learning really focuses on those skills that we need in our really diverse world right now. And it helps students build these skills authentically. And what I mean is some of the things like being able to effectively communicate or being able to see multiple perspectives of problems and issues in their community. And I think it's really, really important that our citizens in Maine and our citizens all over the world have these skills, and service learning authentically focus on that. And while kids are solving problems in their community right now.
So as you were saying, you hope that it might be a silver bullet. May not be right now in this time, but at least the prospects sound pretty good as at least a larger community solution and getting youth more engaged. So turn it back to Kelsey though for a quick second for the next couple. Could you share some details, as we alluded to, could you share some details with us on how you both will be helping to expand service learning in Maine?
Sure. So through the Mott grant that we got, we are going to be able to offer service learning training for community organizations. So they're basically going to be able to learn how to run a service learning program. And we also, with the Maine Masonic Foundation, Charitable Foundation, they have agreed to give us some seed money so that anyone who participates in that training can also have some seed money to be able to do a project. So that's really great for us to, get people involved and get the service learning out there, but then also for anybody who can take the training and get their organization involved, they're going to have that added support, because after the actual training, Tracy is also going to be able to do some coaching, and, as they build out their program, she'll be able to let them know, like, you're totally on the right track, keep going, or just adjust this, that kind of thing.
Now, you mentioned some of the seed money being provided by the Maine Masonic Charitable Foundation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that, it's the hope that this training will be free.
Yes, absolutely. If anyone who wants to get involved, any type of nonprofit organization, as long as they have, the ability to work with youth, they are welcome to join us. Please come.
And we'll be having more information about that training probably a few weeks, is that fair to say? On our website, volunteermaine.gov. So we will make sure that the public is aware where they can get their hands on those or that information to apply for this training. So that's awesome. And again, just to hear, especially coming out of a pandemic, a lot of nonprofits and smaller organizations, hit hard. So this definitely helps. So sounds like it's going to be a boon for everyone involved.
Brian, can I add one piece?
Please.
So I think one of the really important parts why I'm really excited about this grant opportunity is that service learning has kind of three components to it. And for any good service learning project, there's got to be academic integrity, meaning that students are learning real things. There has to be student ownership, meaning that students care about what they're learning and that they're coming up with solutions and they're doing the problem solving. And the third piece is that students are working on real problems with real partners. And so when students are working on service learning and they don't have these authentic partners, sometimes their solutions or their service aren't authentic, or they don't always make a positive impact in the community. And so it's really important to have knowledgeable community partners that understand the model of service learning and how to build that youth engagement and letting kids take the reins on coming up with the solutions, but also having the community partners steer them into solutions that are feasible and that will make a positive impact and can reach multiple diverse people in the community. So having trained community partners going at it and not just focusing on teachers for service learning, I think this is going to be really exciting in the state that we're taking this different angle with this.
Now, if I could just follow up on something you mentioned about how, service learning, there might be this perception that it's only for a classroom setting. And you mentioned that you've worked with some organizations, both in the state and outside of the state, that are not that traditional setting, that have really benefited from this training. Could you give us a couple examples?
Sure. I've worked with organizations, all different topics, whether it's environmental topics, art, social justice, health. To give you some specific examples, I've worked with Massachusetts Audubon, and they've integrated service learning into some of their programs where it used to be just teaching kids about environmental issues. Now they teach kids to identify some of the problems and then come up with solutions. I've worked with humane societies. I've worked with town planners, mayor's offices. I've worked with farming groups, all sorts, you name it. Any organization that's focused on issues and topics in their community, I think has benefited from learning about service learning.
Well, no, thank you for helping to explain that. And I hope that, some organizations that may be watching, representatives from those organizations will realize if they're not in the classroom setting, just how beneficial, service learning can be, not only for their organization, but of course, the youth involved and for those involved. So we have time for one more question, and I'll ask each of you this question. So Kelsey, we'll start with you. Just at a personal level, why do you believe in service learning, and why should organizations in Maine too?
Yeah, Maine's really unique in the sense that we have an aging population. We literally have the oldest population in the country. And none of that is to say that an older generation can't keep contributing, but we're going to start moving into a point in time where there's a younger generation that needs to step up and take over roles. And part of that is, the volunteerism role that we have in Maine. Like you said, Maine is kind of founded on service. So we really want to, empower youth to feel like they can do it. They know what to do. If they see a problem, they can find the solution. And service learning is just such a cool project or a cool way to do that, because kids get to really take on that role of figuring out, like, this is an issue that I see and I want to fix it, and here's how I think I can. And that's, you don't get that in the classroom setting. A lot of times people tell you, here's a book, read it, here's what you need to know, sort of thing. So that's a really cool thing for them to get. And then as they grow, up and become adults. You don't turn 18 and suddenly know how to become civically engaged and know how to be a part of your community in that way. And so this is kind of that seed at the beginning, and then we can have these adults who are super involved in their community and help us keep, that community engagement alive in each of our different towns and counties and everything.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess, Tracy, same question to you.
Yeah, I might repeat a lot of the same things that you said, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think for me, the first reason I went into service learning is because service learning makes school real. But second, our communities are full of problems and needs, and we have assets. And so we need to tap into these mathematicians and historians and all these young people as they're developing these skills to try to help solve some of these problems. They're there, they want to help. And so we need to start tapping into them. And I think piggybacking on what Kelsey said, people don't just graduate and know how to be civically involved. You don't just graduate and know how to do algebra. You got to teach that stuff year after year. The same with this. So these kids are developing those skills so that they become the people that we want to live beside, work beside, play beside. And those types of people are effective communicators. They're problem solvers. They're responsible citizens. And so service learning will help to build those skills. I just think service learning is better than sliced bread.
No.
Sorry, lost it there.
No. That's good, because we're just about at the end of the episode. But no, if anything, I think what that does is it shows your passion, shows both of your passion to the issue. And for me, at least, if I'm one of these organizations, if I'm one of these, an individual responsible for managing a small nonprofit or small organization in the state of Maine, this is the passion and enthusiasm that you want to see, and it does build credibility. Of course, beyond your record, your longtime experience in the field of service learning, which we're so lucky to benefit from, and of course Kelsey's expertise that she is bringing to our office as well. So on that's where, on a fun note, we will end this month's episode of Issues. I want to thank Tracy Harkins, the founder of Harkins Consulting, LLC, so much for taking the time to help us walk through some of the issues that may be tackled by service learning here in the state of Maine. And I know we, as a commission, we're lucky to be able to tap in to you as an asset in your expertise. So thank you for joining us. And of course, Kelsey, we want to thank you.
I'll be around.
Yes, including next month's episode. So before we get into just some of the ways where you can find some of this information on the upcoming trainings, we do want to let you know that we already know what next month's episode of Issues is going to focus on. And we're going to welcome back Kelsey, as well as some guests from the Cutler Institute at the Muskie School of Public Service at the University of Southern Maine. And the Maine Graduate and Professional Center to take a statistical dive into the impact that COVID-19 has had on Maine's volunteerism sector. We've already had a little look at the report, so we can't wait to talk that through with everyone. But to bookend it all on service learning, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey, but volunteermaine.gov will have all the info on the website, and then folks can also reach you via email if they have any specific questions.
Call, either is great.
Well, all that info can be found on the Volunteer Maine website, and I will say that because I don't remember Kelsey's office phone off the top of my head, but I can tell you that her email address is kelsey.preecs@maine.gov. We'll put it at the bottom of the screen for you, as well as in the description on the YouTube version of this episode of Issues. So, Tracy, Kelsey, thank you again so much. And we want to thank you again for tuning into our second episode of Issues. We hope you folks are enjoying this. Obviously, we're having fun putting it on, and we can't wait to continue the conversation about how service and volunteerism can help solve some of these big challenges in the state of Maine. My name is Brian Roach, the Communications Officer for Volunteer Maine. Thank you again, and we will talk to you next month.